The silence coming out of Tehran tonight is deafening, and for those watching the Middle East, it's the kind of silence that precedes a massive storm. For decades, names like Esmail Khatib and Ali Larijani were whispered with fear across the region, the architects of shadow wars and the iron fist behind Iran's domestic suppression. But suddenly, the shadows are empty. As Israel shifts its strategy from destroying missile silos to eliminating the very brains behind the regime, we are entering a terrifying new chapter of the Iran-Israel war. This isn't just about regional dominance anymore, it's about the total collapse of command and control. But as the head of the snake is targeted, every American is left asking the same urgent questions. Are our interests overseas now in the direct line of fire? Is the US prepared for the unpredictable backlash of a regime with its back against the wall? And most importantly, are we witnessing the final sparks before a global conflagration? Tonight, we dive deep into the decapitation strike that has changed everything. To understand the magnitude of what is happening between Israel and Iran, we have to look at the men who were, until recently, untouchable. For years, the U.S. Department of the Treasury has had Esmail Khatib on its radar, placing him under heavy sanctions in 2022. As Iran's Minister of Intelligence, Khatib wasn't just a bureaucrat, he was the architect of the regime's digital warfare and its brutal crackdowns on domestic dissent. His disappearance from the board isn't just a loss of personnel, it is a catastrophic breach of the regime's impenetrable shield. When the man in charge of knowing everyone's secrets is himself eliminated, the message from Israel is clear. No one is hidden, no one is safe. Then there is Ali Larijani, a seasoned diplomat and the former secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. Larijani represented the strategic brain of the Islamic Republic. He was the bridge between the hardline military and the political elite. His sudden removal from the equation leaves a vacuum that cannot be easily filled by a promotion. Alongside him, reports of the elimination of key leaders within the Basiji, the paramilitary volunteer force under the IRGC, signal a systematic dismantling of the regime's muscle. The Basij are the ones who patrol the streets of Tehran, the ones who silence the cries for women life freedom with brute force. By targeting these specific individuals, Israel is effectively stripping the regime of its ability to maintain order. We aren't just talking about a few empty chairs in a cabinet meeting, we are talking about the loss of decades of institutional knowledge and specialized cruelty. As we watch this Iran-Israel war evolve, we see a pattern that should deeply concern anyone following global security. The regime in Tehran is built on a cult of personality and a rigid hierarchy. When you remove the top layer, the middle management, the colonels and the regional directors are left paralyzed, waiting for orders that may never come. For the average American observer, this raises a chilling question. Does a paralyzed regime become more cautious, or does it become a wounded animal, lashing out with everything it has left? The decapitation of the inner circle has turned the axis of resistance into a ship without a captain, drifting dangerously close to a total meltdown. What happens to a revolutionary state when the revolution's architects vanish overnight? This is the central crisis currently paralyzing the leadership in Tehran. As the Iran-Israel war moves into this surgical phase, reports are emerging of a regime in a state of absolute cognitive dissonance. There is a profound ambiguity regarding who is actually holding the reins. Is it a shadow committee of faceless generals, or is it a desperate circle of survivors, each looking over their shoulder, wondering if the person next to them is a Mossad asset? This internal chaos is the high point of the current tension. Israel has managed to create a scenario where trust, the currency of any authoritarian regime, has completely evaporated. When a leader like Ali Larijani is eliminated, it isn't just a loss of a strategist. It's a signal that the inner sanctum has been breached. The funeral footage showing thousands of mourners in Tehran masks a deeper, more fractured reality. The regime's supporters are mourning their own sense of security, while the opposition sees a glimmer of hope they haven't felt in years. However, we must not mistake confusion for total collapse. The Iranian military machine was built for this exact nightmare. They have contingency plans that allow mid-level officers and IRGC units to operate autonomously. Even without a supreme leader or a minister of intelligence giving direct orders, the drones are still fueled and the missiles are still aimed at Israel. This headless operation is perhaps the most dangerous phase for the US and its allies. When there is no clear chain of command, the risk of a miscalculation, a rogue commander launching a strike that sparks a regional conflagration, skyrockets. The reaction from the streets of Tehran is a tale of two nations. On one side, the regime-mandated grief. On the other, a quiet, electrified anticipation among the youth who have been crushed by the Basij for years. The experts in Washington and Jerusalem are watching closely. Will the regime turn its remaining weapons inward to maintain control through terror, or will the decapitation of their leadership finally provide the opening for a domestic uprising that could change the Middle East forever? The tension is no longer just on the borders. It is in every hallway of the Iranian parliament and every barracks of the IRGC. The strategic decapitation carried out by Israel is not just a military maneuver, it is a psychological strike aimed at the very heart of the Iranian social contract. For decades, the regime has maintained a grip on power through a mixture of religious ideology and a pervasive, terrifying security apparatus. But with the removal of figures like the head of the Beishij and the Minister of Intelligence, that iron grip is beginning to slip. We are seeing a profound shift in the civil political landscape of the Middle East. On the streets of Tehran and Isfahan, the atmosphere is electric with a mix of fear and forbidden hope. For the millions of Iranians who have suffered under the regime's morality police and the economic stagnation caused by decades of confrontation with the US, the sudden vulnerability of their leaders is a revelation. When the unbeatable guardians of the revolution can be reached in their most secure bunkers, the aura of invincibility vanishes. This creates what experts call a level playing field for domestic protesters. No longer are they just facing a monolithic, all-seeing eye, they are facing a regime that is blind, deaf, and bleeding at the top. Politically, the consequences are equally dire for the Islamic Republic. In the halls of power, the hardliners are finding it increasingly difficult to project strength. In the world of Middle Eastern diplomacy, weakness is often a death sentence. The regime's refusal to negotiate in good faith is well known, as they view any concession to Israel or the West as a sign of terminal fragility. However, by eliminating the strategists who manage these high-stakes diplomatic games, Israel has forced the regime into a corner where they have only two choices: total escalation or internal collapse. As we analyze this Iran-Israel war, we must look at the defection factor. Intelligence reports suggest that the Mossad isn't just dropping bombs, they are dropping messages. Low to mid-level officers are receiving direct communications, warned that their leaders are gone and that they don't have to go down with a sinking ship. This psychological warfare is designed to trigger a cascade of desertions. For the civilian population, this could mean the difference between a bloody civil war and a sudden, systemic collapse of the regime's enforcement power. The world is watching to see if the Iranian people will seize this moment of elite-level paralysis to rewrite their own future. As the smoke clears from the latest precision strikes in Tehran, the focus shifts back to the US and the high-stakes gamble being played in the Situation Room. For the American public, the question isn't just about who won the day in the Iran-Israel war, it's about what comes next for our own sons and daughters stationed in the region. When Israel targets the highest levels of Iranian intelligence, it effectively dismantles the very network that coordinates proxy attacks against American bases in Iraq and Syria. In one sense, a weakened IRGC is a win for American national security. However, the wounded animal theory keeps military planners in Washington awake at night. History has shown that when a regime's survival is threatened, its red lines become blurred. We have to ask, are American troops in danger of a desperate, asymmetrical retaliation? With the brains of the Iranian operation gone, the risk of a decentralized, lone wolf style of warfare increases. The U.S. must now navigate a razor-thin line between supporting its closest allies' right to self-defense and preventing a total regional meltdown that could drag thousands of American boots back into the Middle Eastern sand. Beyond the military hardware, there is the intelligence factor. The U.S. has long utilized sanctions to cripple men like Ismail Khatib, but seeing them physically removed from the board changes the diplomatic calculus entirely. Can we still avoid World War III, or has the decapitation of the Iranian leadership made a peaceful resolution impossible? As the global economy shudders at the prospect of a closed Strait of Hormuz, the American taxpayer is left wondering if this is the beginning of a new era of stability or the final countdown to a conflict that no one can truly control. The stakes for the U.S. have never been higher, and the window for a managed outcome is slamming shut. We stand at a historic crossroads. The systematic removal of Iran's shadow architects by Israel has done more than just deplete a military roster. It has cracked the foundation of a regime that has defied the West for nearly half a century. But as we've seen throughout history, the most dangerous moment for any empire is not when it is strong, but when it begins to fracture from within. The question haunting the halls of the Pentagon and the streets of America is no longer if the regime will change, but how violent that change will be. As the U.S. keeps a watchful eye on the Persian Gulf, we must prepare for a reality where the old rules of engagement no longer apply. The decapitation strategy has left a vacuum that could either lead to a desperate, last-ditch escalation, potentially drawing American forces into a direct conflict, or a sudden, systemic collapse that finally frees the Iranian people from decades of oppression. The volatility of the Israel-Iran dynamic has reached a fever pitch, and the next few weeks may decide the security of the civilized world for the next generation. In times like these, the truth is often buried under headlines and propaganda. We have to look past the rhetoric and see the human cost, the strategic risks, and the fragile hope for a Middle East that no longer lives under the shadow of state-sponsored terror. The world is holding its breath, waiting to see if the head of the snake can truly be neutralized without sparking a global firestorm. What do you think? Is the decapitation of the Iranian leadership the only way to prevent a larger war, or is it the very thing that will start one? We want to hear your perspective in the comments below. Comment, pray for peace if you hope for a swift de-escalation and a future without fear. Subscribe to our channel if you believe that deep analysis and the truth matter more than sensationalist headlines. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and thank you for watching.